Good evening and welcome to WOW Wales One World Film Festival. I'm David Gillam, the director of the festival, and it's a great pleasure for me tonight to welcome again Arami Ullon, the director of Nothing But the Sun. I had the pleasure of her company last night in another discussion, which some of you may have been at, but tonight we're going to focus more on her really wonderful film. I've watched a bit of it again today, and it's visually strong as well as telling a very tragic story in many ways, and I think this kind of sort of subdued anger in it is a particularly kind of nice note that goes through it. So it's delightful to see you again, Arami. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here again tonight. It's a pleasure.
And I'm going to ask a few questions of Arami now. Oh, I should say this is being recorded, so that's what's going on. I'm going to ask Arami a few questions, and then in a few minutes I will come to the audience for their questions. If you could put your questions in the Q&A function on Zoom, you can find that on your Zoom bar, and any questions go in there. That would be really helpful. I can read them from there. Okay, so Arami, just tell us a little bit, take us back to, in a sense, before you knew this story, and how did you first find out about the story of the Lloreos, and how did you first sort of approach and research the story?
Yes, it's a little bit shaming, the process that I did, but I'm very happy to share it with you because I think it reflects also the situation of many Paraguayans and probably even many people around the world. I am living in Switzerland since many years, and one day I found in the Swiss press this news about Lloreo people still living in complete isolation in the Paraguayan forests. And I was in shock because I didn't know that they were still living the original way of living. And then I decided to research about this. I made a survey with different Paraguayan people from different backgrounds. And what we found out is that none of them knew about the situation of the Lloreo people. So when that happened, I clearly I kind of took the decision of telling this story, but I was a complete ignorant on the Lloreo subject. So I was very lucky to find Benno Glauser. He's an anthropologist, a thinker that is living in Paraguay since many years, and he very kindly and with a lot of patience and with a lot of love introduced me to the Lloreo situation, first in a more theoretical way, and then he really invited me to go with him to the Paraguayan Chaco, a very unpopulated region in terms of the relation of space and people. It's a very, very big region. So he took me for the first time to my first trip to the Chaco, and I got to know Mateo Chiqueno, who is the protagonist of our film. And from that moment on, it took me about 3 years to start recording anything, really. The more I knew the situation, the more complex it became, and the more challenging it was to find the right form to tell the story. So there were many moments where I thought I was not able to do it. And I don't know, but there was something telling me that I should keep on doing it, going through the creative process and finding a way. But it took me a very long time. So yeah, I think that was the beginning of it.
So, but when you say, you researched it, you went there, and then it took you 3 years. I mean, was that going back and forwards to Switzerland, raising money, trying to get a kind of handle on how you wanted to approach it? I mean, I think you also said that you shot for a while and then decided that you needed to shoot it a bit differently.
Yeah, correct. During these 3 concrete years of starting my in situ research with the Ayoreo communities, I was going back and forth. So I was really in Switzerland for many months, then in the Chaco, then in Switzerland again. And also at the same time that I was researching, I was traveling with my first film, and I was co-producing this second film, meaning that the financing of this film was not only on my Swiss producer, but also on me. So yes, I was juggling with all this, and then finally we made the space to really start shooting in 2016, and that was the first shooting period. We had 12 days in the Chaco, and that was really helpful because that was the moment where I really realized what things were good to have as narrative elements and which ones were a bit questionable, right? Since the subject is very delicate, and also this whole ethical thing of how we approach indigenous people when we are not one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the how we got to the first shooting period in 2016, and then we continue in 2018, and we finish in 2019.
Okay, and you, how did you meet Matteo? Because obviously you were talking about the narrative elements, and that kind of gives a spine to the whole story. You know, what he's doing, recording people and so on, and yet he'd been doing that for 30 years or something before you arrived. So just tell us a little bit about how you met Matteo and whether you were still in contact with him and how that kind of relationship worked out, because it was so central to the telling of the story.
Yes, it was Benno Glauser who introduced me to Matteo, because he was a collaborator they were collaborating together. And it was also the NGO that I've been working with, Iniciativa Motocodie, that is still working nowadays with Matteo. So I got to know him through them. But for many years, I needed to understand also Matteo, because language, we needed to communicate together in Spanish because I don't speak Ayoreo, and it was for me at first difficult to understand Mateo's concepts because they were so foreign to me. You know, this whole idea of living completely out of civilization. So it took me many years to understand this, and of course I got to know very fast that Matteo was recording since the 70s, and I knew there was something there, that there was something very powerful there, but it was not so obvious for me at the beginning that this should be the story. I was not very sure if that was the dispositive to help me go through the whole story and hold the film with that. Because, you know, we have all these preconceptions of that we have to have action, that people get bored when people are just talking too much, and all these, you know, pre-ideas of what works in a film and what doesn't. And I'm very glad that I trusted that this dispositive was the right tool to tell the story, and that the film became somehow radical through the decision of just holding the film on this dispositive, and also on the, how do you say that, oral tradition of being together and talk. And
Yeah.
this is how they do it. This is how they remember it. This is how they share together. So I decided to respect that and not to put many other elements in the storytelling.
Well, it was a very good decision.
I think so too, in the end. But it was a long process to get there.
I mean, it's funny because for somebody who just views it the first time, it seems completely obvious that you would use this person because he sits, he talks to people, he brings all the people to you. You just have to put the camera down and you get, you know, I mean, I don't think there's anything as exciting as watching people talk in a way. I mean, you know, you can do lots of drama, but watching, say, his wife's face or the man telling a story about losing his wife altogether the first time, you know, he came in contact with white people, you know, those are such touching stories that telling them very simply or having them told to Matteo, you know, immediately makes a bridge for the audience. So it would seem to me that you almost knew about Matteo and that was the film, you know, why would you worry about, you know? So it works very, very well, I think. And that kind of quietness of just listening, because I think also there's something about the way you place the camera and the way you're obviously trusted by him, I guess, so that the other people come and they seem very natural in front of, you know, in front of you and not, you know.
Yeah.
So that work, I mean, how did you have to work at that, or did you have a very small crew, or were you shooting from much further away than it appears? I mean, how did that all work out? Because it just flows very nicely.
Yes, there are several elements. We were a very small crew. We were always with someone that the community trusted, always.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we were traveling with Matteo, and Matteo is a very well known and respected member of the Ayoreo world. So arriving with Matteo to the communities will open some spaces that otherwise would remain completely closed to us. And being introduced by him and knowing that he has given us his respect and allowed us to film him also made it possible, or made it maybe easier for them to open up to us too.
Yeah.
But there are many different aspects. I mean, logistically, it was also not possible to be more people, you know. It's just it was very tough shooting, also physically, temperatures very high, a lot of dust, problems with lenses because of dust, you know, electricity travels, you have to bring everything with you, even water. So it was logistically also a challenge. I think it was a challenge in every sense. It was a very challenging project.
Yeah, the dust is definitely another character in the film. You know, you feel like you're in some kind of Western or South American Western with all this dust blowing everywhere, and every time he moves, and all this cleaning the cassettes and all that kind of element to it. So how about Matteo now? Are you still in contact with him? Is he still continuing with his work? I mean, bring us up to date.
Yes, I mean, I am in regular contact with Matteo, and he has been also very active in the editing process of the film. Not in terms of you know, getting involved with the structure or the dramaturgy of the film, but he was always helping us with content, you know, like always coming back to him and really, you know, ask again for the meaning. It's like not losing the meaning through this very long process of making a film. It takes years, and you record something and you translate, and maybe, you know, through also cutting the pieces together, you can lose the core of the sense. So he was always checking it with us, and also our great translator Oscar, that did the whole checkup with us from beginning to end, always.
And was Oscar with you there? Because one of the things that strikes you is, how do you shoot stuff if you don't know what people are saying, or how do you know when to cut it or when to move to a, however. So did you have sort of Oscar whispering in your ear? So, oh, look, that's interesting. That's not,
Yeah, similar, but not exactly. I mean, there are different parts of the film, let's say, or we divided it in parts to have different methodologies. When Mateo is recording by himself in the room, we were prepared because Mateo was going to tell us the general subject he was going to talk about. So we were knowing in which world we were at, let's say. When we were doing the interviews that Mateo was holding, it was completely different, because then the person who was interviewed would come out up with something that maybe we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And then you have the third part of the film that are very still images on tripod that are what we call the director's vision, because it doesn't belong to what Mateo is experiencing. It's an external decision to go and shoot specific things. Now, in both cases, when Mateo is recording himself and when Mateo is interviewing other people, we had a Yoreo translator with a receiver sitting near the place where we were shooting. And he was doing kind of simultaneous general translation on paper with approximate time code. So when we would cut, and cutting was a blind cut, it was completely blind, didn't know where we were, I would go and read what he has just translated, and that would allow me to continue the shooting day. But on top of that, there was another process in parallel. So at the end of the day, when we finished the shooting day, the production team would sit with the translator, and with the audio file of the day, they would create a very precise transcription in Spanish. For me to read it the next morning before going to shoot.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
That's quite a process. It sounds a bit like some of these famous Hollywood movies where they wrote the script each night when they got drunk and then went up in the morning and then shot it, I mean, because you don't know what's going on until you get the script in the morning. You go, oh, okay, right, now
exactly.
Yeah,
of course. Just to wrap up the idea, it's we had a clear sense of which story we were telling. So when we were talking with Mateo and with preparing with Mateo the interviews that he was going to do, we were all having the same focus. We are talking about the loss of home of this person. How was this experience for this person? And is this person willing to go back? It was always the same subject and the same focus, because otherwise it would just, we will have too many subjects.
Yeah, go everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned the bits that were the director's vision. So the very kind of formal on the tripod sort of, dusk with people sitting around, or the church, or, people driving up a dusty street. I mean, that I find that, watching it again, it's just interesting how that places the story, I suppose, and how that gives the outside eye on where we are for those of us who are, don't know anything about it. Do you want to just say a little bit about, how you made those decisions? Because obviously, in a sense, those weren't driven by the interview and Mateo, but was your vision.
Well, that happens by observation. I was not planning to have these sequences. Right. And it just happens that I start traveling in the Chaco, and all of a sudden we need to stop the truck from time to time because there is a dead animal in the middle of the road. So this goes beyond imagination. No, you when you are thinking how you will do the film, you don't think that this will happen. So that is something that I discovered while being there, and also start observing the gates. They are just gates everywhere because the Chaco is mainly a private property, the whole region.
Yeah.
So these things are coming really by being there and observing.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that, yeah, that helps the audience, doesn't it, to kind of to arrive there, really. Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, you're still in touch with Matteo and so on. So what's the situation like for the Arayos now? I mean, is it very much as we see it? Is it the same? Has anything changed for them? Are they still sort of surviving on government handouts and going to church to drink water, as it were? I mean, you know, is the life continuing?
Yes, life is continuing like how you have seen it in the film. I think the situation is even worse at the moment because of the corona crisis. Yeah. They were already in an emergency situation, and I think now that is beyond what we can imagine. So I don't know, the panorama is quite pessimistic right now, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're currently at sort of 4 or 5 festivals at once. You have your film playing, and that you've had a long day and so on. So I think, can we just take a couple of questions from the audience now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So I've got a question from Glenn Starhog, who I know was there last night as well. So it says, "Thank you again, Arami. Please explain the English title of your magnificent film. My understanding of Spanish is very limited, but I get the feeling that apenas el sol suggests only or just the sun. And this connects with Matteo's comment that the whites own everything, including the land and the water, and the only thing they do not own so far is the sun. So nothing but the sun means that the Arayo people now only have the sun in their culture of respect and worship. The other way of translating the title might have been everything apart from the sun, referring to the white destruction of their culture. Were these different ways of translating your title discussed? And how does it work in French or German, since you live in Switzerland? Yeah. Too long a question, he apologizes, but he's interested in how, that translation. Yeah.
Well, it's titles are very difficult, and you know, the Spanish title was not this one. From the beginning, we had several titles, but at some moment we came with this very strong statement of Matteo, right? This is the only non-private resource that they still have. So that is the reason why we decided to put nothing but the sun. But on the other hand, you know, it's not my mother tongue, so I cannot really go into so many subtle details about that title, that version, and I cannot do it. I can not do it in German or in French either. Now we have a French title, Rien que le soleil, and I cannot judge it. And sometimes this is very painful because you have to let it go. You know, like, I'm not going to control the Japanese. I cannot control Japanese title. I cannot control Korean title. I cannot, you know, it has a life by itself, and there are several people working with the film, and we are a team, and we have different expertise, and the English title belongs to a suggestion to a English speaking person. Yeah.
You've got to let go. It's difficult, I'd have thought, but yeah. So there are a couple of other questions, one of which I'm just going to answer, because that all these recordings are being saved and they will be up on our YouTube channel. So it might take a little while, it'll be tomorrow or the next day. But yeah, if you look on the WOW YouTube channel, there's already Arami's talk for, yesterday is already up there. And I've got one final question here from the floor, which is, this is from somebody who is a film and TV student. Do you have any tips on how to break into the industry when you don't have any previous connections? She's feeling very inspired by your work. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got into the industry, because you started pretty young, I believe.
Yes, I don't have any tips. I think it's really difficult to get into the, well, industry, if you want to call it, but it's also difficult to call it industry because it depends in which territory you are and how it works, depending on the country, language, etc., economy. But I started by accident. I was invited to a casting for a TV show and I just couldn't perform. And so I was very frustrated. I was going to leave the studio and someone came to me and said, we know that you are very well connected with young people in several different schools, and we are looking for someone to work in production. And I didn't have any idea of what production was, but I found it intriguing. And then I decided to go for it. And that's how I started being a production assistant. And that was when I was 16 years old. And from then on, I kept on working on television commercials mainly, because that is what actually pays your living, your salary. And then little by little, I started doing short films, very experimental short films. And luckily, I ended up living in a country that has a lot of financial support for filmmaking, especially it's a very good country for producing documentaries, Switzerland. But this is a complete accident. I was not planning to fall in love with a Swiss person. So it was an effect of that.
Yeah, I think accident plays a lot bigger part in people's career than they often admit to. You know, I was 35 before I discovered by accident what I wanted to do. So, you know, it's sometimes that's how it happens, isn't it? Okay, look, I think what I'd like to say is that Arami has had a very long day and she's been doing a lot of other things. And I'm afraid I know there are some other questions, some very complimentary things about your film that say that it reminds them of Satyajit Ray's World of Apu, which I think, you know, that's a fairly high praise. So, but, you know, Arami, thank you for coming along at the end of the day for you. It is quite a lot later in Switzerland, of course. So we are going to just wrap up now. And I do hope to continue another conversation with you privately, because it would be great to keep in touch, because I think your film has been, you know, for me, it was one of the real discoveries, you know, of researching the festival and so on. And I've been really pleased how it's been received by people, that people have come to see it. So thank you for tonight and thank you for your film. And hopefully we will be in touch again. So
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the space to show the film, the space to think about the Ayoreo situation, to think about indigenous peoples around the world. And it was a pleasure for me to share with you yesterday and today. I thank the audience, and I really also would like to keep in touch with you. I have to say sorry because it was really a very long day, but I'm very happy that you are here. So thank you very much, and we keep in touch.
Thank you, Rami.